you have to realize that, unfortunately, what's happening in Syria is a big problem. I've commented on my Telegram channel, on Twitter as well, on this phenomenon, because when Ahmad Shara marched into Damascus in November and December of last year in Syria, and you have this new Syrian government, we had our hopes, but I was skeptical. I said, we have to wait and see. There are a lot of red flags with this guy, Jolani. He's being praised by the Zionists. We have to wait and see. And I was slammed for that. I was attacked, mercilessly attacked, nonstop. By who? Mainly by Salafis. Arab Salafis, specifically from Syria. And they launched this whole campaign against Daniel. He's a Rafidi agent. He is an agent of Iran. But what's happening now? You have Shara going and taking photo ops with Donald Trump, with MBS, with the Gulf monarchs. Every other week he's going and visiting the UAE. And there's a lot of talk that they're on the cusp of normalizing with Israel and either joining directly the Abraham Accords along with the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco, Sudan, etc., joining directly to form this Abraham alliance with Israel, or a kind of de facto under the table normalization with Israel that's going to be a little bit more discreet, but functionally it's the same thing. It's normalization with Israel. That's what's on the table now. That's what's actually a possibility now. Now imagine, people were saying, like some of these Jolani fanboys were saying, Daniel is just an Assadist, Daniel is a Rafidi, he doesn't see this great victory for Ahl Sunnah, Jolani is going to take us, first is Damascus, then is Jerusalem. That's what Jolani said, right? This is going to be the coming of the Khilafah, this is going to really turn the tides, Israel is finished, Israel is over, the Palestinians finally will have that support that they've always called for from the Sunnis now, not the Shia, the Sunnis now are going to go and march into Jerusalem to save the Palestinians. And at the head of the army is going to be our Ahmad Shara, our Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani. He's going to be leading it. This is the kind of rhetoric that they were coming out. And you had all of these du'at coming together. The blessed revolution. This is the blessed revolution. It's ill-advised. It's ill-advised because we know how this goes. We are old enough to know how these revolutions turn out, especially when you have someone who's compromised like this Ahmad Shara and all the red flags that are coming with him. Maybe hold off on having the blessed revolution live streams, guys. Maybe hold off. Can you do that? Maybe 6 months to a year, hold off? No, we have to prove how committed we are to the revolution, the Sunni revolution. You've been played. You've been played. Now what's on the table is normalization with Israel. By the way, the Syrian government is not denying it. The Syrian government isn't coming out with a clear statement. We will, under no circumstances, normalize with the state of Israel. They're not denying anything. And these reports are pretty shocking. The reports are saying that Jolani is making a deal to give up the Golan Heights to Israel and establish bases, a buffer zone in the south of the country, just miles away from Damascus. How can you see this as anything other than a humiliation and a defeat? And I said, I even had one of the previous Haqiqatjous, I said that Syria has the potential to be Jordan 2.0, just another version of Jordan, just another buffer zone for Israel. The whole country is a buffer zone for Israel to protect Israel. Just another client state, just another vassal state. That's what we could potentially have with Ahmad Shara. And I am completely against Bashar al-Assad. I've spoken against Bashar al-Assad for over a decade, since way back in 2013. When I had the start of having social media, I was speaking out against Bashar al-Assad and his brutality, not to mention Russia and Iran and Hezbollah. I've been speaking out against them. But just because they're bad doesn't mean Shara is good. Doesn't mean that Jolani is good and this is a blessed revolution. Can we think like, are we that simplistic and binary in our thinking that, oh, if Assad is bad and Iran is bad, that means that Shara is good? Such a low IQ way of thinking. They could both be bad. They could both be disastrous. They could both have their problems, major problems, and now we're seeing that play out. But guess what? In December of 2024, when you had Jolani come and ride through the country and take over all of Syria within a week, less than 10 days, you had some of these Salafis and others saying, guess what? I'm going to become a Madkhali for Jolani. I'm going to be a Madkhali for Jolani. Anyone who criticizes Jolani, you should be killed. Wow. Wow, that's a sudden change. Why so much support for Jolani? Like this kind of obsequious fervor for Jolani. Why? What has he done to earn that kind of loyalty from you? That now you're a Madkhali for Jolani? These are people who absolutely hate and revile the Madkhalis. They view the Madkhalis as the ultimate traitors to the Ummah, the ultimate traitors to Palestine. They hate and do takfir on these Gulf rulers and their associates. But now suddenly you're a Madkhali for Jolani? That's a very interesting change overnight. That has had a huge effect because the Salafi movement and Wahhabism in general, obviously we don't conflate Salafi with Wahhabi. I think there is a meaningful difference. I've discussed it in the Wahhabism documentary and elsewhere, but just for the sake of ease of speech, you have this Wahhabi movement and you have all these Wahhabis / Salafis, and they were split on the Madkhali issue. You had the Madkhalis who are bootlicking these Gulf rulers, calling the Palestinians grave worshippers, attacking any kind of Islamism, whether it's Ikhwan or Taliban or anything like that. And then you have these other Salafis who are not anti anti-Islamism. They are anti-normalization with Israel. They're anti-Hindu temples. They're anti-Abrahamic religion. That's this faction of Salafis. Now, because of Syria, a huge amount of these Salafis have joined the Madkhali camp, not by name, but in their attitudes, in their sentiments. Now they also have this orientation that we should not criticize what Jolani is doing. We should not criticize what the new Syrian government is doing. We shouldn't criticize it because we don't understand the hikmah. We don't understand the wisdom of the ruler. And if you are going to criticize Jolani, it's going to potentially cause civil war or rebellion, and that's going to be terrible. So don't criticize. Don't criticize. The same exact arguments that the Madkhalis have been giving for decades, now these other Salafis, Wahhabis, they've come out and they're adopting those same lines, the same arguments, the same logic, and ultimately for the same purpose, especially if they sign the papers and Syria normalizes with Israel, joins the Abraham alliance and forms the Abrahamic shield, the Abrahamic bloc. That's what's coming. So because of Syria, that's the point that I'm trying to make. So much of Salafism, if not Wahhabism, has become a shield for Israel, a shield for Zionism. Don't criticize Jolani. Don't criticize the new Syrian government. There's wisdom, there's hikmah. And you see these people, they would vomit if they heard the Madkhali arguments for normalizing with Israel. The Madkhalis would have all these arguments. They'd say that, look, Israel is not going away. Israel has all this economic power, all of this diplomatic power. Let's establish economic stability. Let's establish security so that we're not being invaded and bombed by the US. We need to have these diplomatic ties with Israel and normalize with them for the safety of the Muslims, safety and economic prosperity of the Muslims. That's the Madkhali argument for normalization with Israel. And now the Syrians have adopted the same logic. They've adopted the same reasoning, the same guidelines. And what gets thrown under the bus? The Palestinians. Not only the Palestinians, but the future of the Ummah. The future of the Ummah also gets sacrificed. The future of Syria and the Syrian people gets sacrificed because we know what normalization means. Normalization doesn't mean economic security. It doesn't mean stability of your country. It doesn't guarantee that you're not going to get bombed. What it means is that you have to secularize your country. Any kind of Islamism is going to be repressed, brutally repressed. Anyone who calls for Sharia, anyone who calls for Khilafah is going to get imprisoned or killed as a terrorist. So forget about Islam. Okay, Islam is going to be erased by normalization, and that's what we're seeing. That's what Vision 2030 is about. Newsflash. That's what it's about. That's what they're doing in the UAE. It's about abolishing the Sharia. That's what normalization means. So, okay, you're going to get economic security at the cost of Islam. That's what you want. And by the way, you're not even going to be secure because at any time, Israel can expand into these countries. That's what they're doing in Lebanon. That's what they're doing in Syria. That's what they're doing in Jordan. That's what they're doing for the Sinai in Egypt. They're planning to expand. They have the Greater Israel Project. So you're not even going to be secure in that sense either that you're hoping for. So this is just delusional thinking. It's a false promise given by the Madkhalis to justify the satanic, Dajjalic project of normalizing with Israel. And now, unfortunately, we see so many Syrians and Salafi, Wahhabi, or whatever, even Sufi, it doesn't even matter. They are using these same arguments. And that's why I think people are trying to predict when is this, because all these reports of Syria about to normalize with Israel are coming out and people are speculating. Is it going to happen by the end of the year? Is it going to happen next year? I think it's going to happen in months. I think it's going to be announced within months. An indication that I have for that is how hard the sectarians are going online. They're trying to pave the way because they know there's going to be a huge backlash. So they're trying to really soften the blow by riling up sectarianism and saying that, look, if you oppose Ahmad Shara and you oppose Syria joining the Abraham Accords, you're an Iranian agent. You are working for Iran. Look at my replies on Twitter, nonstop. This tells me that the funding is coming through to really push this narrative on social media. And that's the point that I was trying to make, is that this is the new narrative to normalize Israel, to normalize relations between these Arab countries in the Middle East and Israel. They're going with the sectarianism. They know that it plays well because of the hatred that Sunnis have for Iran. And by the way, prior to the Syrian revolution, most of the Arab world was very pro-Iran, despite the best efforts of Riyadh to turn Muslims away from Iran and view the Shia as the blood enemies of the Sunnis. Despite that nonstop propaganda, the Sunnis in the Arab world were very pro-Iran. They view Iran as the defenders of Palestine, the defenders of the Palestinian cause. But Iran, unfortunately, they flushed that down the toilet by backing some idiot, brutal dictator, bloodthirsty butcher in Syria. Why? What was gained by that? So that's my critique of Iran, but the point remains that this is the new PSYOP, and we have to be ready for it.